Don't give me a minute.
Okay, Lori, please.
So yeah, there's some information that Bill already shared.
Yeah. And once again, you've indicated you have the book. If not, the book is on the way, and that'll we will index some of this content specifically to the book. So we'll put something on Edmodo, which highlights some of the key content, tells you which chapters and pages that occurs on. Next, please. Next slide, please. There, thank you. Yeah, so that's what we're going to do tonight, an overview of the model of providing consultation or coaching within the itinerant preschool special ed model. So let's start with this. What would we describe as the objectives of consultation? The basic feature is the intended outcome of consultation is that the early childhood special education teacher, the related services professional, they engage in behaviors that are consistent with a transfer of knowledge and skills to an early childhood education or child care partner. We say this generically because when we work with other programs, sometimes we're working with people who are working with child care providers. Sometimes early interventionists, the birth of three side of things, are working with parents. In other cases, people, I noticed at least one of the applications said you work with Head Start. So when we talk about a partner, we're just talking about somebody who's not in the early childhood special ed profession, who has a child or children with special needs enrolled in their program and would benefit from this technical assistance, information, and skill transfer that you would be involved in as a consultant. This transfer of knowledge and skills, in our case, we're talking about IEP-specific knowledge and skills, which would help your partner teacher or partner professional to better understand how they can address these child's priority IEP objectives with evidence-based practices within the curriculum or the educational or childcare setting in which the child is enrolled. So that basically, in a nutshell, are the objectives of the consultation process. Next slide, please. Okay, the practice of consultation. In order to affect this transfer of knowledge and skills, the consultant and the early childhood special ed teacher or RSP, related service professional, needs to adopt intentional strategies. That's the key feature of our conversations over the next couple of months. What kind of intentional strategies and tools can be used to facilitate the systematic and supportive transfer of knowledge and skills to the partners? So that makes consultation an actual professional enterprise versus just flying by the seat of the pants periodic visits to partner teachers without a clear agenda or toolbox that will allow you to systematically support these teachers in addressing the needs of their children with IEPs and also in providing specific tools. So we have the model of consultation and the practice of consultation. And over the next couple of months, we will address content related to both of those. Lori, you're up. It's like a baseball game. Lori's on deck, now she's up. You guys get the model. Still there? Are you there, Lori? Oops.
Oh, let me see if she's still here. I think she.
Yeah, she should be there under her daughter's contact.
Is it a phone number?
Yeah, no, I mean, in terms of that, the icon's down the bottom. It should be in E, Elizabeth Falcone. She's there under EF, I think.
EF.
Let's see. Yeah, she should be.
I'm here. You guys can't hear me?
Oh, now we can.
Yeah, we couldn't
Okay.
before.
Okay, that's weird.
But good to
Yeah,
check
and
with-
I don't know why I'm under here under my daughter's name, although she was, anyway.
Yeah.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, although it's got multiple slides on it.
Okay. Okay, so Bill and I, as Bill mentioned, we became interested in this about 25 years ago. I think both of us, it's safe to say, have been very interested in early childhood and inclusion and thinking about how we can best help young children with disabilities learn in regular education settings. And probably, gosh, now close to 30 years ago, was some of the first research on early childhood inclusion. There was an Early Childhood Inclusion Research Institute, and they are sort of the ones who coined the term itinerant service delivery and looked at two different models of itinerant service delivery. And within a consultative model of itinerant service delivery, the prime responsibility of itinerant staff, including itinerant teachers or itinerant related service providers, is to really focus on how they can help educators and primary caregivers to think about ways that they can support children across the child's typical day and routine activities. The other model that contrasts that consultative model of itinerant service delivery is what they coined, the term they coined as a direct model of itinerant service delivery. And basically within this direct model, the primary function of the itinerant staff is to tutor the child, again, either providing one-on-one instruction or small group instruction to the child focused on IEP goals within the context of ongoing activities. And so in the case of a more direct approach to itinerant service delivery, IEP-based instruction is really limited to just the time that itinerant professional visits the child. The purpose of a consultative model is to think about how teachers and caregivers can provide intentional instruction throughout the day and across the week when itinerant staff are not available. So within the field of early intervention, they've talked about consultation and triadic intervention. Consultation is really defined as a much more indirect intervention strategy in which the itinerant teacher or the itinerant related service professional and the early childhood teacher work together to address an area of concern or a common goal for change. So, that's really an important distinction that we have to think about, and one that we want to focus on for this webinar specifically is sharing some information with you about the rationale and about the research behind a consultative approach to itinerant service delivery, and think a little bit about the steps in the process that we've developed when you're thinking about providing consultation in general education settings. And when we're talking about that, we're talking about general education settings like community-based preschools, Head Start centers, childcare providers, public preschool settings, any place where typically developing young children receive education and support. Bill, back to you.
Nope, still you.
Okay, there we go. So this is just a little diagram of a triadic model. You can see that there's the graph on there, or the figure really explains everything. That the primary purpose of that itinerant staff is to work in partnership with either the early childhood teacher or the parent, who then in turn provides support to the child. You can see strong, solid lines. There's a bidirectional arrow. between the itinerant staff and the early childhood teacher. And there probably should be a bidirectional arrow between the child and the early childhood teacher or the parent. But there's a dotted line between the itinerant staff and the child because the primary focus of the relationship is really between the adults who are working to support the child. Okay. And I don't have access to the chat function, but if you all have questions or comments that you'd like to make, Suzanne said that she was monitoring the chat.
Yeah, I have access to it, Lori. I can see it.
Okay, I guess I can't because I'm sharing the screen.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll turn it back to Bill. He wants to share a little bit about research on distributed versus massed instruction.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate the graphic, the last slide Lori mentioned, and that's a key feature. The model that most of us know in education is direct instruction. The teacher teaches the child, the teacher teaches the student. The consultation model basically says, for a number of reasons, which we'll explore here in a few minutes, it's really more efficient for the consultant to teach the partner teacher who then teaches the child. So it changes the dynamics considerably. Most adult professionals in education work with children, whatever their age is, infants, toddlers, preschoolers to high school. The model where adult professional educators work with other educators is still relatively new. There seems to be much more interest and activity in that particular area, but that's a fundamental change in the role of, in this case, the itinerant preschool special ed teacher or the preschool special ed teacher and related services professionals. And we're going to talk about why that role makes sense as we move into the next slide. So this is one of the fundamental planks in the platform of consultation. The research, the evidence that supports consultation versus episodic direct instruction. It rests on this principle of developmental psychology and learning that distributed instruction is more effective and efficient than massed instruction. And the distinction is instruction is most effective when all of us, including children, in this particular case, our focus, have multiple opportunities to learn a skill and practice a skill across the day, across a range of activities, across a range of materials, and sometimes across different peers or other adults. And so here's some reference citations, relatively recent, that talk about these particular issues and why distributed is advantageous versus massed instruction. And that's a key feature of the consultation model. Next slide, please. And Beth, we'll get to your question about students with severe disabilities in a bit. Thank you. Sounds like a telethon or something, right? So on the left is a basic example of a task that might occur in a preschool setting, massed versus distributed. So the massed instruction model says the child will be instructed with the same materials multiple times in a single session, often without a break, which is what often occurs when you have 60 minutes a week to come into a classroom and work with a child. So in this particular case, we're looking at identifying basic shapes, for 20 minutes during that itinerant visit. Distributed instruction is the alternative. The child is engaged with same or different materials multiple times with breaks between instruction and practice. So this would occur if the teacher recognizes opportunities to embed activities that require children to differentiate between shapes. Games are presented to children which require shape recognition. Art activities require shape recognition, etc. So instead of having these single massed episodes of trials, we sometimes hear that term trial, we have opportunities for learning distributed across the week. And part of the issue with that, there's two parts of that issue. One is having partner teacher recognizing opportunities, and secondly, helping partner teachers take advantage of those opportunities. And those are some of the things we'll be talking about a little farther on tonight. Next slide, Lori. So this research on mass versus distributed practice goes back a long way. We're not going to drag you down into this, but since we're academics, you guys are professional educators, we had to give you some history, and so there it is. All the way back into the 1800s, researchers were investigating more efficient modes of learning and determined that mass practice seemed to be more effective than, that distributed practice seemed to be more effective than mass practice with respect to acquisition and, more importantly, maintenance and generalization of skills. More recent research and extremely recent research, some of it at UC San Diego, some of it at Dartmouth College, are related to the differential effects of mass versus distributed practice. And the outcome is basically people learn better when their opportunities are distributed across time rather than massed together. I don't know what your personal interests are. Lori can share her knitting metaphor. Mine is, mine is golf, something like that, where very few people recommend you just come down to the driving range and spend 3 hours once every 2 weeks hitting balls. A more preferred strategy would be to come down every 2 or 3 days for an hour and hit balls. The idea being, once again, more opportunities for instruction, practice, and learning. And I think if you reflect on the way you learn best, some of you, whether you think cramming was the way to go, or whether in those courses you took that you actually liked and you actually read the stuff across the semester, how you felt about your learning there versus the stuff where you just had to hunker down for 48 hours before an exam. Do you want to discuss your knitting metaphor since I dragged it up?
Well, actually, it's crocheting.
See, there you go. Right off the bat, I get it wrong. Yeah.
But no, I will go back to, I used to play the clarinet in school. And when people, my band teacher and music teacher used to say, practice about 15 minutes a day, every day, that is attributed to what people know about distributed instruction versus massed instruction. If you really want to gain those knowledge and skills, rather than, you can cram for an exam and you can do well on the exam, but probably a few days later, that knowledge and information doesn't stick. So, researchers have really demonstrated across the lifespan, younger children versus older adults, that we all learn better when opportunities to learn are distributed across time rather than massed together. So that really is a fundamental principle of what we're really talking about when we say, how can we best help children with disabilities learn and achieve what they need to achieve?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Lori and Bill, we have a question in the chat from Beth that says, what about for severe nonverbal students who are functioning at a very young level?
Yeah, let us go through just a couple more slides, Suzanne, and then we'll come back and address that question from Beth.
Perfect.
Thanks. Next, Lori. Three basic features here of what are the elements of distributed instruction. Why it produces better learning and better retention than mass instruction. And so timing or arrangement of review and practice has an effect on your efficiency of learning. Practice is more effective when it's spaced over time or instead of massed. And spaced practice enhances memory, problem solving, and transfer of learning to a new context, aka generalization, which is the holy grail and the gold ring that every special educator is always looking for. The kids will produce this behavior in different circumstances at different times, not under the control of the same instructor, et cetera, across multiple materials and multiple contexts. So, we've got that relatively recent research going for us with respect to why distributed practice seems to make some sense. Next slide, please. So yeah, as Dr. King says, in short, space practice enhances the efficiency, the efficacy and efficiency of learning, and holds great promise. And I sort of have to chuckle because apparently it's held great promise since about 1816, if you remember a couple of those slides back. But yeah, whatever. When we get there, we get there. Can we? The next slide will be a point we can address Beth's question. So, this issue about masked and distributed, the next question that usually triggered is, well, how much intervention instruction is enough, and how often should the intervention or instruction occur? So high doses of teaching per se may not necessarily be the most effective approach. More learning can result by increasing the dosage, the dose frequency, the number of sessions per week, while applying lower doses across longer durations of some types of goals. With some types of children, to Beth's question, and with some doses. What that really means is, rather than 60 minutes once a week, if in the general education curriculum for the 5 days a week the child was there, if during the course of the day they had 20 cumulative minutes where they were supported in addressing the same skill acquisition as the one 20 or 30 minute session during the mass trial, but that occurred over the 5 days of the week, lower dose and more frequent opportunities might result in better learning. That's once again the promise of distributed practice. So to Beth's question, what about kids who are severely delayed nonverbal students who are functioning at a very low level, a very young level? So I don't know what age we're talking about, Beth, but let's just say we're talking about 4-year-old kids who are functioning more like a year and a half, something along that line, kids who are significantly impaired with respect to typical developmental expectations. And Lori can chip in on this in a second. There's lots of phases of learning, but the first phase is acquisition. Before we move to, maintenance and generalization, or actually fluency, maintenance, fluency, and generalization, we first need to acquire the skill. Some kids, depending on their cognitive function, their levels of awareness, their behavior, variations on the theme, their attention, their meta-memory skills, will master skills more quickly than other kids. Other kids who, as a result of either significant cognitive delay, other significant sensory impairments, environmental deprivation, variations on the theme, may require more focused instruction earlier on in the acquisition phase, which might be relevant to kids who are severely delayed or nonverbal. It also is the issue that with respect to inclusion, most of the kids that we encounter who are in inclusive environments across the country typically tend to be kids who demonstrate something like mild and moderate delays with respect to typical development, not severe delays or multiple handicaps. That does not mean those kids shouldn't be in inclusive settings. It just means that sometimes the model, particularly with the majority of kids who are in special education who are relatively high functioning kids, this model is about a perfect fit, really, with respect to exposing kids to opportunities for learning and instruction and correction and modeling throughout the week rather than the 1 hour of visiting. For kids with more severe delays, it may be that with respect to the itinerant teacher, the related services professional, they need to transfer the skills to the child's teacher who's going to be with them, including these kids if they're in inclusive settings, even if they're in self-contained settings, by the way, and don't have the skill set. Those skills have to be transferred so that the adult who spends most of the time with those kids, particularly the kids who have more significant disabilities, understand how to address their IEP objectives because they have many more opportunities to do so. So we'll get into that here in a second too, about how powerful our 60-minute a week and related services, episodic hit and run interventions are compared to what could happen if other adults who spend much more time with the children had some idea of what we do and why we do and how they could also pick that up. Next slide, Lori. So yeah, I guess I kind of got ahead of myself, but there you have it. Providing interventions within the context of daily routines and activities, daily is the key feature, should result in more opportunities to practice, refine, and generalize skills. So, that's a win-win-win situation right there. Next slide. Lori, you want to take it from there?
Sure. So again, as we were talking about the different models, I wanted to bring to your attention the fact that, we're talking about two different ways that early childhood special education professionals provide services to kids with disabilities and their families. And most of us, including myself, way back in the day, when we were prepared to be teachers, were prepared to be teachers in a traditional early childhood special education classroom or an early childhood classroom. But it was really kind of a classroom kind of a setting where we knew that the most important thing that we needed to do was to interact with our students and to help support and promote their learning and development. Along comes this question of inclusion and what are the, we know a lot now about the benefits of early childhood inclusion and how well all children can learn in inclusive settings. And one of the things that happens then is that our traditional views of what it means to be an early childhood special educator or a related service professional within an inclusive environment really changes. And so, we as in terms of the field have adopted this itinerant approach. And I thought this slide was kind of amusing. When I just did a Google search on itinerant services, and this is one of the images that came up. A lot of folks who provide itinerant services get a big chuckle out of this. Because although the technology has changed a lot, really itinerant staff, folks who provide itinerant services, put all their stuff in a car and go from place to place to work with students and to work with other individuals. And so way back in the day, we had itinerant peddlers, we had itinerant different people who traveled from place to place. That's what the term itinerant means. So kind of going back to what I had talked about a little bit before about two different approaches for itinerant services. The term itinerant, all that means is that somebody who travels from place to place. What we didn't know a lot about 25 years ago or 30 years ago, and we're just continually learning, is what is the best way for that itinerant staff person, whether it be an educator or related service professional, what's the best way to support children with disabilities within inclusive settings. And so the research that Bill shared with you on massed versus distributed instruction and dosage really supports the idea of a consultative approach to itinerant services.
Yeah. This is also,
yeah.
So food, could you go back to the cart for a sec? By the way, you guys need to get used to this. Lori and I have been working together, even when we're 200 miles apart as we are now, or perhaps. We've been working together a long time, so we sometimes trip over each other and go back and forth, but it's just the way we work. It's nothing personal. In any event, one of my great career laughs related to doing a training session for itinerant teachers in a rural area in Ohio. And I brought with me an itinerant teacher travel kit. And most of the itinerant teachers are women, almost always. There's a few guys here and there, but not many. And so I had a little packet together with, some snacks and things, and also some toilet seat covers, for the truck stops they had to stop at on their way. And then the last item I had was a fishing rod. And one of the teachers said, well, why would I need a fishing rod? And I said, because when you go off the road in one of those ditches here and they don't find you for 2 days, you might need to, fish for your lunch or the like. So in your case, what I know about Arizona is fishing rods may not be that good out there in the desert, but you might need some kind of a harpoon or something to stab a horned toad or a Gila monster or something to get you through a couple of days.
Ay, ay.
Yeah, those folks up in Kingman and Nottaburg, they might know what I'm talking about.
So just again, remember that our focus for tonight is to really help you be able to explain to other people why a consultative approach to itinerant services is so important. And so we're providing you with a lot of background about research. Another area when we talk about evidence-based practice are the DEC recommended practices. DEC is the professional organization, leading professional organization for early childhood special education. And they have come forth with a set of evidence-based recommended practices. And one of the most important practices as it relates to environment focuses on the importance of practitioners who provide services and supports in natural and inclusive environments during the daily routines and activities that promotes child's access to and participation in learning experiences. So, that becomes a really important context for understanding how we provide services to kids. So the slide that Bill was talking about a couple slides back, and when we were a teacher might be working on identifying the names of different shapes, that's a very isolated skill. What we really talk about doing and what's so important is providing supports and services to kids within those daily routines and activities that promote children's access to the curriculum. And again, that's what special education is supposed to be doing, and related services. We're helping students or children obtain access to the general curriculum.
Mhm.
There are also DEC's recommended practices for instruction that inform and support the notion that a consultative approach to itinerant service delivery is the best way to go. One of those components for instruction is that practitioners plan for and provide the supports that children need in order to access, participate, and learn within and across activities and routines. So, again, we're talking about the importance of context and the importance of learning in the regular early childhood environment. Practitioners embed instruction within and across routines, activities, and environments to provide contextually relevant learning opportunities. And practitioners use systematic instructional strategies with fidelity to teach skills and to promote child engagement and learning. So all of those kinds of things, it's kind of like a marriage between what we know about early childhood development and early childhood education and principles of special education and specialized services in order to provide what we know is the best type of instruction for young children with disabilities. Bill, this is your slide. I know I'm supposed to talk about it, but do you want to talk about it? Because I kind of always think about this as yours.
All right, that's fine. Sure. Yeah. That's the key challenge here. And we just spoke about what seems to be more efficient modes of learning, distributed versus mass practice, DC recommended practices, which now, are tilting in favor of consultation. And this is the question for early childhood itinerant teachers and for related services professionals. If you had enough magic in your bag for that 60 minutes of instruction or whatever that time period is that you provide during a once a week visit, we wouldn't need to consider a consultation model. And that would be okay because, as you know, it's much easier to schedule an itinerant travel model than consultation. You just blow into the room, you either pull the kid to the side, pull the kid out, pull the kid over with a couple of kids, say hello to the teacher, you maybe have a little bit of a conversation, but you do your work and then you sign out and drive away and you go to your next building. So it's easy to develop a schedule. Unfortunately, what that 60 minutes a week inoculation with this kids, it's not enough, because after you leave, they're still in that same setting for 32 other hours until you, and then of course 100, whatever it is, 7 days or somewhere about that before you come again. So you really have to think about that. I mean, is what I'm doing with this kid really powerful enough to compensate for all the time that would be lost if nobody, the other adult in his world, didn't understand how to follow up on this? Or is it strong enough to wash out some of the negative behaviors or skills that, the loss of skills that might occur during the week I'm not there? So that's really what we're stuck with. And as I said, if the itinerant model worked, the rolling related services professional fix, that'd be great. But unfortunately, the data suggests it doesn't.
And one of the other an important piece of research that was conducted to back this up is the fact that for many kids who have IEPs, the only specialized IEP-based instruction that they receive is from the special educator or the related service professional. That doesn't mean that what they're getting the other times during the day aren't really important, but special education services are provided to kids based on their IEP. And one of the things that we really want to see is making sure that children are receiving enough IEP-based instruction during the week and across the week to be able to make a difference. We have done the 60 minutes once a week model is basically in Ohio. Itinerant services are mandated to be provided at least 4 hours a month. And so most school districts have defined that as once a week visits for an hour. And you know, what Bill said was completely true. For very young children, once a week, for an hour is probably not enough in order to give the kids the support that they need. So that's kind of the crux of the argument that we're trying to make, is that you can make more of a difference in a child's life by working with that child's caregiver who's around the other 30 hours a week or however many hours a week when the special educator or the related service staff are not there, than you can by just focusing those services once a week or however many times you're there, unless you're there a lot. So that's one of the things that's really important.
And I'm glad this slide is highlighted in green because it's really good. Yeah.
So another thing that's really important, and I think that the traditional focus on itinerant services being seen as a teacher who comes in and works with a child on IEP-based instruction really filtered down to what we know, to what happens in preschool. As a lot of things happen, right? Those of us who are real advocates for developmentally appropriate practice in preschool and in early childhood education understand that those types of approaches just are not effective for very young children. And distributed instruction may be more sensitive to the developmental nature and the needs of many young children. You know, the idea of sitting with a little kid, you know, tutoring them on the names of shapes, for those of us who are familiar with working with young children, can kind of say that that's not a very effective approach based on what we know about young children. They're looking here, they're looking there, they're doing everything except paying attention to what you want them to pay attention to.
Yeah, plus this little guy goes home at night and his mother says, "What'd you do today?" And he says, "Miss Stacy came and she hurt my head." I mean, you know, too much to do.
Hey,
Right.
Bill, one thing that we were kind of talking about in the chat over here is that teachers may have more access to parents right now, given that a lot of the instruction is occurring through distance learning or through, teletherapy or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Boy, that is absolutely, I've been thinking the same thing, that maybe one of the unintended consequences of providing services to preschool kids with special needs is beginning to understand how important it is that the adults who are with kids can do a lot more than a teacher over a computer can do. And even if when that teacher comes in person, that we can make so much more of a difference when we're working with the other adults in those children's lives, rather than focusing exclusively on children. I was I have 4 grandkids, and 2 of them, one's in 5th grade and one's in 2nd grade, and they were staying at our house for a while. My daughter and son-in-law are doing a reno on their house, and so they did the first 2 weeks of school via remote learning, and I was had to sit with my 2nd grade grandson in front of the computer, looking at all of the remote instruction and remote learning that they're doing, and couldn't help but just be amazed at teachers' dedication and their commitment to kids in terms of the content and what people are trying to do for young children, while at the same time thinking how difficult, what happens when we try and do this with technology. I sat with Ben, and I think the teachers spent most of the time either telling the children to mute their microphones or unmute their microphones to teach. And so, there's kind of got to be a better way, and really helping the other adults who are in kids' lives understand how they can support children's learning, I think is a much more effective approach. So one of the things, and Bill, I kind of lost my place in terms of the allocations.
You're good. Rolling.
Because I don't have the numbers of the slides on here.
Okay.
So we talked about, so as Bill had mentioned, we've been doing this for a long time. And one of the things that we found when we first started working with itinerant teachers was a lack of any kind of a step-by-step process that teachers might be able to use in adopting a consultative approach to providing itinerant services. There was a strong understanding that this was the way to go, but there was very little infrastructure or very little information about exactly what you do and how you do it if you're providing consultation as an early childhood special educator or a related service professional. So we kind of made it one of our missions to provide some steps in the consultation process that we think are important.
Yeah.
And here's a graphic of the steps that we've kind of come up with that we think are important to focus on. As you can see, there are 9 steps in the process. You may, when you get through this and you start working through this model, you may identify a different number of steps. That's helpful. But I think from a supportive point of view, the most important thing that you can do as administrators and as a team is to start to think about your own process and what are the steps in that process going to look like, so that you can provide some structure and some support to the itinerant staff who are providing services, as well as the general early childhood teachers who are working in partnership.
Yeah, and we've discussed this at length with many people, and we're willing to concede this, that there might be other models that have fewer than 9 steps. There may be some models that have more than 9 steps, but there can't be a model that works that has 3 steps, okay? And if it has 18 steps, you need some therapy or medication or something. It's not going to happen. So yeah,
we think,
somewhere in between there is something that you can work with.
but we do think, I'm sorry.
That's,
We do
this is
think
Susie.
these,
Oops, I'm sorry, Lori.
I'm sorry too. We do think these are all important things that have to happen within the consultation process. Susie?
I was just going to say that, you know, looking at these, I'm reminded that they don't all happen all at once, that, you know, that these are steps, a series of actions and activities that take place over time that, you know, with respect to the children and the consultative and implementing the consultative model.
Exactly.
Yes, we've self-righteously said that, you know, the mantra is something like order from chaos. That's, you know, hopefully what we're promising here, some order, something logically sequenced over time that you can take a peek at and look at indicators of your progress.
And again, you know, when we developed this, you know, there are a lot of people who are advocating for itinerant staff to provide consultation, but really very little direction as to what they needed to do. I think it's probably pretty safe to say that all of us on the call today entered the profession of education or related services because we wanted to help people. Some of it, you know, we want to help young children. We want to help young children who have disabilities. And so the way I was prepared, and I dare say the way that most of us were prepared, was to work directly with the child. That's kind of our comfort level. We know how to do that. We are comfortable with that. We're much less comfortable with what it takes to work with other adults in order to support the child. And so that was one of the reasons that we really came out that, you know, we decided it was important to write the book, and it was important, if we could, to provide some guidance to the field.
Yeah. We try to avoid the business of winding people up and then just letting them go without any kind of support or guidance. I think you've all been down that professional development road. It can be kind of exciting and entertaining, but 2 weeks later, you're thinking, what the hell happened? So, you know, we're going to leave you with a template, some breadcrumbs, you know, additional guidance to decipher and decode some of the stuff so that it fits the structure that you work in.
And we're not going to talk about all 9 of these strategies tonight.
No.
We're probably going to talk about the first 4. And then we'll save the rest for the next webinar.
Or the next 2.
So,
yeah.
The next 2 webinars. So let's jump in. Bill, is this you or me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's you.
Okay. So, so these are some key steps or tools that support consultation. And this is kind of what our focus will be within this consultation process. We're kind of talking about, when we talk about MEPI, MEPI, we're really focusing on a way to prioritize or triage what our focus will be on IEP goals and objectives. So that's kind of what step 3 is concerning. When we talk about step 4, we're talking about what are some ways that we can help general early childhood teachers plan curriculum that focus on meeting the needs of young children with disabilities according to their IEP goals and objectives.
And you can step this up through, you know, the model steps 1, SMART objectives, all the way to CARES kit. Then I'll jump into MEPI.
Okay, great. So there are other steps in the process. Again, we'll talk about those later. So here's the model. If you go back, let me go back to this. The first step in the model is to make sure that the IEP is helpful and helpful and useful. Bill?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
So we think that this is important to do. It's important for every person on the team, including the general education teacher. And that's, I think, when things kind of fall apart sometimes for young children in inclusive settings. I have a doctoral student who's just finishing up her dissertation research. And, there's a lot of evidence, at least in Ohio, to suggest that many times general education teachers aren't ever really aware of what's on a child's IEP, much less involved or take any kind of leadership or ownership in terms of thinking about what important IEP objectives are. So we think one of the most important things that you can do as a team, itinerant staff members and general educators and families, is to make sure that those IEP objectives are SMART. And we know that that SMART acronym refers to a lot of things. Leanne Young back in 2007 referred to SMART as being objectives that are specific, measurable, attainable, routines-based, and tied to a functional priority. So that's the first step. And we're not going to spend time talking about all, the nature of IEP objectives. We just want to bring to your attention the fact that this roadmap to providing itinerant services, consultative itinerant services, starts with the child's IEP and focuses on the IEP goals and objectives. In addition to making sure that those IEP objectives are good, solid objectives and goals, it's also really important for members of the team to make sure that the curriculum is tied to your local, your state level early childhood objectives and any kind of previous assessment information. We know from the early childhood challenge grants that occurred a long time, some years ago now, most states have early learning standards, and those early learning standards really represent the general curriculum for young children, including young children with special needs. And again, remember that the purpose of special education services is to make sure that children have access to the general curriculum. So we want to make sure that children, including children with special needs, can participate in a meaningful way in the general early childhood curriculum. We think the second step in this process is making sure there's a goodness of fit between the characteristics of the child and his or her learning environment. So, an example for me that automatically comes to mind is thinking about some of the characteristics of early childhood classrooms and whether or not they're suitable for young children who perhaps may have some sensory processing needs, kids who may have autism or be on the autism spectrum. That some children, you really need to look carefully to make sure that there's a good fit between how that child learns and the characteristics of the learning environment. So we think a big part of step 2 is being able to think about the child's learning environment and doing some type of a standardized assessment. There are many different tools that you can use. There's the Early Childhood Environment Rating Scale, the Inclusive Classroom Profile, or the, I can never remember now what the teapot is. It's the Teaching Practice Observation Tool. So those are all tools that you can use that really enable you to look at a structured view of that child's early learning environment and to see where the strengths are to really support that child and where there might be some room for growth in terms of helping that child, helping that environment be more conducive to children's learning. And we will post some information in the EdMotive site about that step 2, about the goodness of fit. We'll also post the information about SMART IEP objectives. We're not going to spend as much time focusing on that because we think it's probably knowledge that you already have. And again, an important consideration in thinking about that step 2 is whether there's alignment between the child's need and the program, to review the curriculum that the program uses to make sure that the children's IEP objectives can be embedded into the curriculum. And so nowadays, most of the early childhood curricula that are being used, for instance, Teaching Strategies Gold, the creative curriculum, really does do a nice job in terms of helping you think about how you can address IEP goals and objectives within that regular early learning curriculum. Here's a resource, and if Suzanne has any extra money in her budget, I would seriously think that she needs to provide copies of Karis Kit, or that your district does. Karis Kit is a wonderful resource that focuses on children's learning environments and provides a systematic way of evaluating the goodness of fit between the child's needs and the environment. It's built on principles of universal design for learning. It was developed by an occupational therapist and a speech language pathologist, and again provides a very structured and very focused way of thinking about what do we need to do in the environment to help children be successful throughout the day and across the week. So I'm going to turn this over to Bill because we're now focusing on step 3, which is really a triage or prioritization approach to thinking about what do you need to focus on and how that needs to happen.
Yep.
And I don't know, any questions or comments? I can't see the chat, so.
Yeah, I'm addressing something right now, and I'll be done in a sec. Boom. Yeah, the next 2 items here in approximately just 20 minutes, these are key tools, and we always are able to return to these. Once again, the webinar will be posted. You can go back and look at these, and we'd encourage you to do that. And also we can address questions and refine our responses through the Edmodo site if you have particular questions about any of this content. But the next 2 steps are 2 tools that are, in my opinion, incredibly important to the consultation process. So let's start with step 3 here. The MEPI process. MEPI is an acronym, and we'll talk about the details of that in a second. But we think this is an interesting concept. What it says is that the early childhood professional, the early childhood special educator, the related services professional, and the partner teacher should sit down and look at the child's IEP and make some decisions about what types of instructional modes or practices would be appropriate and what level of intensity is necessary to master these skills. And perhaps more importantly, which of these 8 or 9 or 11 objectives are most critical in the opinion of the partner teacher and can be the early childhood special educator related services person can concur with that. Which of these objectives would be a priority that this teacher would like to address in her learning environment? Next slide, Laurie. So it's a system. MEPI is a system or a process through which the early childhood special educator or the related services professional get to a better idea of the skills, talents, interests, perspectives of their partner teacher. And the partner teacher also gets to a better understanding of how to approach some of these objectives and what types of commitments she needs to make in terms of appropriately addressing these IEP objectives. Next slide, please. So the acronym MEPI. The question is, what factors contribute to children achieving their IEP objectives? And we've settled on at least these 4: maturation or biological influence in practice. And particularly, I always address this to my SLP colleagues that between September and June, or whenever you guys start and quit, that 9 or 10 months of exposure to other peers and the learning environment, expectations and corrections and practice, what effect does that have on a child's language skill development, or in some cases more particularly their articulation? So let's just consider the power of biological maturation as something that drives the attainment of some IEP objectives. The next level of intensity would be environment. So what would the effect of materials, routines, and expectations be in the teacher's management and manipulation of these things to encourage children's development? What effect would that have on addressing IEP objectives? The P stands for peer mediation, which I think most people who have been in special ed for a while might agree with me that it's probably the most neglected learning tool that we have in the profession in terms of how to support children in their learning. So peer mediation, structured peer interactions, either with some type of peer coaching or other kinds of attention the teacher can provide certain peers to interact with children with IEPs. How productive is this for achieving IEP objectives? And the last stop is intensive, I. So after we look at those other three factors, maturation, environmental manipulation, and peer mediation, when is direct intervention necessary and to what extent? So MEPI is a planning process in which to look at IEP objectives and how to address them. Lori? Next slide, please. We are going to post much more detail in Edmodo. You can always count on that, and it will be there. But here's a kind of refresher of what I just went through. MEPI, how does maturation, environmental management and manipulation, peer engagement, peer interaction, and direct intentional instruction, what effect do they have on these IEP objectives? Next, please. Next slide, Lori. Okay. Other factors to consider in terms of prioritizing IEP objectives. And oops, one back.
Yeah, I think there's a delay.
Ghost in the machine. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the previous slide really talks about prioritization, issues that will affect the mutual prioritization of IEP objectives. And you can look at these, but certainly issues that address a child's health or injury or threat from peers, et cetera. Those types of behaviors need to be addressed immediately. Perhaps some skills that enhance a child's social value or his engagement with his peers. Sometimes critical prerequisite skills like literacy and numeracy, preparing for the next environment with 4.5, 5.5-year-old kids moving on to kindergarten, and in some cases, parent concern for specific developmental milestones. Next objective, please, or next slide, please. Yeah. So what should be the result of having these kind of conversations? They don't have to occur over multiple weeks, by the way. This could be executed probably within an hour, with the right focus and the ability of the teacher, you and your partner, to just sit down and focus on this IEP. It helps the partner teacher understand the richness of the early childhood learning environment. We have to understand that in some cases, the partner teachers are not aware of the richness of their curriculum. And it may improve the confidence and comfort of the partner teacher that she, in fact, is in a position to address these IEP objectives. Next slide, please. There's some detail here, which we're not going to go over, but there's a number of reasons why this MEPI process is an excellent process with respect to getting to know the partner teacher, and once again, helping the partner teacher understand she is in a position to address this child's IEP objectives, and that you will help her in providing her with evidence-based practices and helping her understand when she can address these objectives within her typical day. Next, Lori. It's like somebody's rolling out aluminum foil. Yeah, and once again, you guys, next week or whatever, over a cup of coffee or a white wine or a Coca-Cola, whatever's going down out there, margaritas, you can look at this and take a peek at some of the deeper dive. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide.
Okay, so we talked about the first 3 steps. Remember, thinking about making sure that everybody's on board with the IEP goals and objectives, assessing the goodness of fit between the child's learning environment and characteristics of the child. Step 3 was prioritizing IEP objectives. So you can kind of see how we're going from a more macro approach to a much more focused and micro approach. And again, we hope this provides some information and structure to you. As Suzanne had mentioned, this is something that happens over time. And you need time as a team to be able to address and think about this. But being able to identify learning opportunities that happen in daily routines is the crux of step 4. And we think it's a really important step to go through, again, through a strategic analysis of not only what the child's IEP goals and objectives are, but also what's happening during the day and across the week that the child might benefit from and how we might use in order to offer some IEP-based instruction. When we're talking about this approach, if you look at it in the research literature, you'll see it called a routines-based model or an activity-based model for intervention. The important things to remember is that specialized instruction, IEP-based instruction, occurs within the context of children's daily routines and activities. So we don't create special instructional time to focus on naming shapes or identifying colors or things like that. We work all of those things right into the routines or activities that occur during the child's day.
Yeah, there's no art activity for children with IEPs. There's just art activity. We figure out a way to address IEP objectives within the art activity.
And that's one of the things that, quite frankly, has always made me feel proud to be an early childhood educator and an early childhood special educator, is that we know what works for children, and our responsibility as professionals and as adults is to see how we can use what works for children to help support their any learning challenges that they have. So we all know, any of us who are working with young children know that the things when you're principal, or that probably that doesn't happen anymore, but maybe the 6th grade teacher comes into your preschool classroom and says, well, you really have it easy. All the kids are just playing. We know that play provides the most developmentally appropriate opportunities, learning opportunities for young children. And they're very, very important, just as important as the academic subjects or academic disciplines are for kids, that those daily routines and activities are the curriculum for young children. And we know this to be true because we know that, first of all, that children learn best when they're interested and motivated. Anyone learns best when they're interested and motivated in something. Children learn best when they have opportunities to learn and practice skills that occur throughout the day. And number 3, if we want to promote inclusion in regular early childhood settings, we have to respect the fact that it's difficult for busy early childhood teachers to take time out of their classroom schedule to provide special instruction to meet students' learning needs.
Hey, Lori, we've got about 6 minutes to go. So if you want to, get into the actual matrix as soon as you can.
Yep. So we've developed this planning matrix. Well, we didn't develop it. We have just capitalized on it. A matrix planning approach to identifying where during the day and across the week we can embed that activity-based intervention. And so you see on this slide, this is a curriculum planning matrix. Across the top of the slide, you see the major things that happen during that child's preschool day. And then across the left-hand side of the matrix, you'll see the child's IEP goals and objectives, as well as the Arizona Early Learning Standards. And so basically what we're advocating is using this as a tool to identify things that happen during the child's day that can become opportunities for learning based on IEP objectives. So you'll see in that first box under arrival and the first child A's IEP objectives in terms of selecting items and position in classroom labeled with the child's first name. So being able to identify his or her first name. What can we do during arrival to help increase children's opportunities to learn to use that? So being able to put that child's name on his or her cubby, that's something that we always do in early childhood classrooms. But again, thinking about that as specialized instruction. And
go ahead.
The matrix model is really focused on taking something that happens routinely during the day and thinking about how we can use that as the context for providing specialized instruction.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue. Can you go back there for 1 sec? The general feedback we get from people who have been involved with itinerant teachers and, more importantly, partner teachers, preschool teachers, et cetera, is they love the matrix. It takes the IEP and it puts it into a form that is perfectly concrete for them. They now clearly see how this IEP objective can be met, where it can be met, when it can be met, and how it can be met. So, I mean, the general reviews are that preschool teachers, childcare providers, and parents love the matrix. And the point about parents is, as you mentioned, you're now working more with parents. If you just change those activities to home-based activities, whether it's breakfast, laundry, this or that, gardening, and help a parent understand how she could address some IEP objectives during the course of the day without filling up all the boxes. That's why there's some blanks there. You don't want to do an overkill thing. But this is a fundamental tool of the consultation process. And I noticed in some of your applications, you took at least one team mentioned that they needed some tools to move the model forward. This is number one with a bullet in terms of a planning tool that is extremely helpful in moving the consultation model forward.
So when you think about using a curriculum planning matrix to identify some learning opportunities, you basically are addressing accountability issues too, and documentation issues. So as a team, if you can come up with, a kind of focused approach on how are we going to address Stevie's IEP objectives during the day, all of a sudden you have some documentation that this is what you're using to help access the general curriculum. This is something that you can send home with parents so that they can see the benefits of having Stevie within that early childhood classroom and allay any concerns or fears that they might have about their child not getting the type of instruction that he or she needs.
Mm-hmm.
And again, as usual, we always have a lot more content than we have time. But you can
always have it stored. It's always stored, ready for review.
You can review this.
Yeah.
I think that this can be very helpful for you. I'm not sure whether or not you already have any kind of familiarity with using a curriculum planning matrix, but it really allows everybody to see the range of learning opportunities that occur.
So Lori and Bill, I posted posted in the itinerant model group for 2020 in Edmodo, the curriculum planning matrix, a sample like the one that you showed, and then a blank one that can be used. And I think we usually see you guys post pages from the textbook that would be relative, like additional readings that would help with understanding a little bit more about this. I also have posted in there the PowerPoint presentation from today, and we will upload the recording to this Edmodo site as well.
So I think we again run out of time.
It's okay. And it would be good to review these things, between now and our coaching session, the slides.
Let's talk about your coaching session while we have 30 seconds.
Just go right there.
What I'm going to do is I'll contact each one of the teams, and before I do that, or when I'm in that process, what I'd like you to do, each one of your teams, is to figure out a day of the week and a time of the day that's conducive, that you all can be on a call. You don't all have to be in the same place, but we have to identify a specific time of the day and day of the week when we can all be on a call, so that we can kind of talk through some of this stuff, find out how we can better help you from an individual team basis.
Yeah. Hey, Laura, you just want to show them the shoes? Our reassurance?
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, we're aware of this. We've looked at your demographics. We know you're not all the same, but our promise is we will find you a size and style that fits.
That's great. Yep. Appreciate it.
And again, this is a slide that I always really like. Whenever we're trying to make a difference and change the way we work, it's always outside of our comfort zone. But if anything over the last 6 months have told us, getting out of our comfort zone and thinking about different ways of doing things, that's what we need to be focusing on.
Ain't that the truth? Yeah. In fact, here we are. Lori and I usually do this sitting next to each other. Now we're socially distanced by 250 miles, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, just end up on there we go. Yeah.
Woo.
That's kind of
we are ahead of the way.
Yeah. We had done a workshop like this in Rhode Island, and I loved the wave thing, and I said, what am I going to do in Arizona? Bingo.
So again, we're really looking forward to working with you guys. We applaud your efforts. It's been this, I think it's maybe our fourth cycle of working with teams in Arizona. You guys are doing great things, and you really need to receive that pat on the back that you deserve in terms of doing what you know is best for kids and families.
Yeah.
You have been doing an awesome job, especially after going to your training.
Good.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and as I've said, Lori and I are, in the later phases of our careers, and so we're not building our reputation on your shoulders, okay? So, we come in peace. You can trust us.
There's our email addresses. Feel free to contact either one of us. You can leave messages on the Edmodo site, but also if you need contact information, please feel free to reach out.
Alrighty. Well, thank you, everybody. And thank you, everybody, for putting your name in the chat so that I can get attendance. There was kind of a little bit of a mismatch between names of people that were on the application and then the people who are here today. So I want to make sure to get everybody credit who's here.
That would be good. Thank you.
So,
yeah.
Thanks, Bill and Lori. Do you want to hang around for
You're welcome.
Bill and Lori, do you want to hang around for 5 minutes and touch bases on anything?
Yep, can do.
Erica, you can stop the recording and save the recording.
Susie, I want to show you a trick on how to